Got a really cool one for you today. We're going to look at the groove from Salt and Pepa's early 90s hip-hop classic, Whatta Man. It's a really funky one. This track was a reworking of a song from 1968 recorded by Lynda Lyndell, also called Whatta Man, and it was recorded by the sort of Stax-Volt label. I don't know who the drummer was. It could have been Al Jackson or maybe Willie Hall. I really don't know, but it's a very nice feeling groove, and it's got lots of interesting stuff in there, even though it's just a 2-bar figure that we're going to work on today. So let's start off looking at the hands, because that's where all the interesting stuff is. The hi-hat plays 8th notes with 3/16 at the end, but we're going to just play straight 8th notes for the time being while we work out what's happening in the snare department. The snare is playing 2 and 4 backbeat, an accented note or a louder note, but we've also got a bunch of ghost notes, and we've got the ghost notes on the 2 and then the 3 and the 3 and then on the 4 the last 16th of the bar, we have another, maybe a bit heavier than a ghost note, but not quite backbeat level snare drum stroke. Okay. Now, all this is taking a familiar, what I would know as a boogaloo pattern: 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and we're going to add that one extra ghost note: 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and 4. And it's the 3 and that can be tricky to control at first. 3 and, okay? 3 and. And to make it work really well, you want to keep your hand as relaxed as possible and just sort of let those notes fall out so that the stick does as much of the work for you as you can. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and 4. Okay. Now, to make that roll smoothly, let yourself practice the 3 and a bunch of times. 3 and, because you've got a sort of mismatch or a coordination challenge between the hi-hat 3 and the snare E and. Okay, E and. I moved my hand funny there. Yeah, so again, we're just letting the stick fall there. 3 and, 3 and it can be tricky. You might want to dig into the 3, or you might dig into the and with the right hand, 3 and, or you might kind of overplay the E, 3 and on the snare, 3 and, or something like that, 3 and. And one very common problem is sort of letting the left hand, in this case, the snare drum hand, rush 3 and, and getting a kind of flam on the and, 3 and. So if you try and play this pattern, 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 2 and if you find there's a bit of rushing or flamming in that 3 and in particular, practice that really slowly. 3 and. You just do this. Okay, but don't be afraid to break things down and work on those little details. Okay, so work on that really well. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4. That's the main thing. When that's feeling nice and smooth, you can then turn the last beat into 3/16. So the hi-hat's going to go 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. And again, to make that sound funky and cool, try and keep that as relaxed as possible. You might even just let the stick fall again if you can get that to work, or I don't know if you like using your fingers a little bit there, but the main thing, you don't want to work it too hard. At the tempo of the song, you can actually just use 3 discrete wrist movements. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That works. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2. I like it a bit bouncy. 4 and. Okay, now let's see if we can put the 4 and hi-hat notes in with the snare drum ghost notes. And if you've got those snare drum notes sounding really good, when you try and add this in, that might make that fall apart a little bit, but don't worry. And you could always sort of practice going 4 and, 4 and. Again, focusing just on the bit you need to work on. 4 and then 4 and, 4 and, 4 and, 4 and, 4 and. Again, depending on how hard you want to hit the of the 4. 4 and, 4 and. Okay, so let's see how those hands are coming along. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1, 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and a 1. Okay, now once you've got that all flowing nice and smoothly, it should be reasonably straightforward to put the first couple of bass drum notes in, because the first 2 bass drum notes are on the 1 and the and of 1. 1 and 1 and. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. Now that sort of doesn't really rub up against all the challenging bits of the rest of the groove that you've just been practicing with your hands. 1 and, there's nothing happening there. So in most cases, I'm pretty confident that you'll be able to put that in if your hands are feeling really comfortable with the pattern. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Practice doing that a bunch of times, and once you get comfortable doing that, the very last ingredient you can add is putting the bass drum on the and of 3 in every second bar. Right, but at first you're just going to practice doing that every single bar. When you add the bass drum on the 3 and, you might find that it rubs up against those 2 ghost notes a little bit and causes some problems. It might mean that the second ghost note ends up being overemphasized. So where you've practiced getting a nice gentle dropping of the stick for the 3 and, you introduce the bass drum here now, and it might cause you to dig in a little bit with your snare drum hand. So you might end up going 3 and, something like that. You want to add an impact there because your right foot is active and it'll pull that. 3 and, 3 and. So you can practice going 3 and again, just that little portion of it. 3 and, 3 and try and detach the movement of the left hand from reacting to the fact that your big fat foot is now involved. 3 and, 3 and, 3 and. Okay, just let that again softly fall. And don't be afraid to work on those little details. That's the stuff I think that makes, gives anyone the possibility of sounding really, really good. If you're not afraid to just dig into that rather than just thinking, oh, I have to play this whole pattern and getting stuck. 3 and, 3 and, 3 and, 3 and, 3 and, 3 and, 3 and. Okay, work through that. You might find if you don't end up accenting the 3 and, maybe you get a little bit of flamming, or maybe the left hand tends to rush again. 3 and, 3 and, 3 and, something like that. Something might go a little bit off, is what I'm trying to say. So spend a little bit of time working that stuff out, and then put the whole pattern together, and hopefully you'll end up with something like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's that. There you have Salt and Pepa's Whatta Man. Now, when that's all flowing, and once you can play along to the song, you could then explore playing different bass drum patterns against that hand pattern. And you could use that in millions of different contexts. You could learn how to play it at different tempos. So you can use your imagination and change the bass drum pattern. And I'm going to attach a PDF to this video. I'll link to it in the comments, and I'll add a few examples of sort of bass drum patterns that you can try, but really, you know, anything you want to do there, there's no limit on what you can do with your imagination. And once you've got the hang of the groove that way, you could work it out using right hand on the ride and playing your left foot, hi-hat patterns and so on and so on. You could turn this into a whole saga if you really want to. Anyway, that just about wraps that up. So let me know how you got on with this groove. Leave me some comments, thumbs up, all that good stuff, and subscribe if you'd like to be informed about my next video. Now I think it's time you better go off and practice.